David Bowie was always afraid of losing his mind. His fears weren't completely unfounded. His older brother had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. As it turns out, though, it wasn't genetics, but rather a steady diet of cocaine that led to Bowie's insanity. A path that not only resulted in paranoia and psychosis, but also an unhealthy obsession with the occult and Nazism. It's honestly a miracle he survived at all, let alone made such amazing music during that period. Bowie started using cocaine around the release of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. The album turned him into a superstar. Prior to its release, Bowie and his band were like a close-knit family. They lived together, ate together, went to clubs together, and even went on holiday together. According to Spiders from Mars drummer Woody Woodsmansey, Bowie began to distance himself from the band during the second leg of the US tour in 1973. He'd started to go to the venues in a separate limousine, whereas previously we'd all traveled together. On several occasions, he even stayed in a different hotel from the rest of us. It became clear that Bowie was now separating himself from the band. There were no more meals together prior to the shows. Sometimes we didn't even see him until he arrived for sound check. Even the sound checks weren't fun anymore, with hardly any social interaction. We obviously understood that Bowie was the star of the show, but we'd come this far as a gang, and now it seemed it was being broken up. Woodsmansey didn't understand the change in Bowie's behavior until he spotted a new crew member who never seemed to be doing anything. When he asked someone who the guy was, he was told it was Bowie's coke dealer. He had literally brought someone on tour whose sole purpose was supplying him with cocaine. Earl Slick, who was his guitarist on several albums, noted the same behavior years later. There were times when he was just not there. There's no doubt about that. I know that drug very well, and what will happen is the drug just makes you isolate yourself emotionally from everybody. He wasn't as forthcoming as he could be, couldn't engage in conversations. He was completely isolated from the rest of the band before the shows, after the shows. It was like him and then it was us. It was not a band by any stretch, except on stage, which was scripted. By the mid-1970s, his cocaine use was out of control. Unlike the average drug user who had to settle for low-quality street drugs, Bowie had unlimited access to sealed bottles of pharmaceutical cocaine, often supplied by doctors and dentists who simply wanted to hang out with him. He did so much cocaine in 1975, he didn't even remember recording the album Station to Station. I can only think of one incident on Station to Station. I remember working with Earl on the guitar sounds out in the studio itself and screaming the feedback sound I wanted at him. That's about all I remember of it. I can't even remember the studio. I know it was in LA because I read it was in LA. During this period, he was staying up for days and would often start recording sessions at 2 or 3 in the morning. Harry Maslin, co-producer and sound engineer on Station to Station, has vivid memories of cocaine-fueled recording sessions. There were times, though, when he was doing so much cocaine that he would come into the control room and he'd have a bottle of pharmaceutical coke with him, and he'd pour out a pile on my side of the console, then he would pour out a pile on his side of the console. Then he would go out to the piano and pour out a pile. Then he would go to the music stand where the vocal mic was hanging and pour out a pile. So we never had to move to take another bump or another hit of cocaine. And we're talking piles, we're not talking lines. I was very, very careful not to do what he was doing because I had to be in charge. The only time I would do some was when I literally had to keep up with him in the sense that I didn't want to go to sleep. That's how crazy it was. Not shockingly, Bowie wasn't eating very much. His diet at the time largely consisted of cocaine, red peppers, and milk. He'd also occasionally eat ice cream to gain weight. Years later, he estimated at one point he was down to 80 pounds. Mirroring the breakdown of his physical health, Bowie's mind began to unravel, leading to frequent bouts of paranoia. While living with musician Glenn Hughes in LA, he became worried the Manson family was coming to kill him. My house was literally half a mile away from some of the Manson murders, and one night David came to me in the middle of the night and said, "Where are your guns and knives?" I wasn't going to tell him where my guns were because they were really hidden, because when you're doing that much cocaine, you become extremely paranoid. But David went into the kitchen and got all the sharp steak knives and the butcher knives, and he hid them. When I came down in the morning, I said, "Where are all the knives?" And he said it's just in case the Manson family, who by now were all in jail, came to get him. I would say we were probably both doing 7 grams a day each, and that is a lot of cocaine to snort. There was a moment when we were getting high, and David started to bleed from his eye, actually bleeding. It was getting really bad. His paranoia also led to an unhealthy fascination with the occult. He'd been interested in the subject for years, but while living in LA, he became obsessed with it. This resulted in Bowie being abducted by witches and becoming so frightened he decided to perform an exorcism at his home. It all started when his wife, Angela Bowie, received a call from him while she was in London. She'd never heard him so terrified. He said he was with the devil, or more specifically, that he was about to be with the devil. He was in a house somewhere. He didn't know exactly where, except that it was in LA. And 3 people, a warlock and 2 witches, were holding him for some terrible Satan-related reason he kept trying, very incoherently, to explain. He wanted to get away, he said, but he didn't have any money, and he didn't know where he was, and anyway, the witches wouldn't let him leave. He was talking in slurred, hushed tones and hardly making sense, and was crazed with fear. She convinced him to give her the phone number, which she then gave to a friend of theirs who lived in LA. The friend called Bowie and convinced him to walk into the street, hail a cab, and ask the driver to bring him to his home, promising to chase the witches away if they followed him there. He managed to make it to the friend's house safely, and Angela immediately flew out to LA to join him. When she arrived, Bowie explained what his captors had planned. They wanted to cast a spell on him and force him to inseminate one of the witches in a ritual ceremony on All Saints' Eve, with the goal of bringing a child of Satan into the world. Convinced he was simply paranoid from doing too much cocaine, Angela calmed him down and started looking for a rental home. She finally found one he would accept. A white cube house with an indoor swimming pool. Things seemed fine until one day he thought he saw Satan rising from the pool. Freaked out, he demanded an exorcism. The problem, however, was Bowie wouldn't allow any strangers in the house, so he had to perform the ritual himself, while, it should be noted, extremely high on cocaine. Wanting to humor him, Angela quickly got detailed instructions from a local white witch and collected the necessary talismans. The exorcism was ready to begin. There he was then, primed and ready. The proper books and doodads were arranged on a big old-fashioned lectern. The necessary mega lines of cocaine were laid out on the billiard table at his side. Everything was prepared. At a certain point in the ritual, the pool began to bubble. It bubbled vigorously. Perhaps thrashed is a better term. In a manner inconsistent with any explanation involving air filters or the like. After some 15 minutes, by which time David had done about another gram of cocaine and made it to the end of his ritual intonations, the water began to calm. Soon it was back to normal, just another indoor pool in Hollywood. I kept my eye on it for the next 40 minutes or so, and nothing unusual happened. And so, with my heart in my mouth, I slid one of the glass doors open and, ignoring David's panicked screams, went out to the ledge and looked in. I saw what I saw. Nothing can change that. On the bottom of the pool was a large shadow or stain which had not been there before the ritual began. It was in the shape of a beast of the underworld. It reminded me of those twisted, tormented gargoyles screaming silently from the spires of medieval cathedrals. It was ugly, shocking, malevolent. It frightened me. Not long after the exorcism, Bowie decided it was time to leave LA and sober up. He moved to one of the bleakest neighborhoods in Berlin, sharing an apartment with Iggy Pop above an auto parts store. In Berlin, he was anonymous and able to avoid the pressures of fame, often eating at a local working-class cafe. To quote Bowie, "Nobody gives a shit about you in Berlin." While he cut back on the cocaine, it was unfortunately replaced with heavy drinking. He still managed to go on the occasional drug binge, and one day he completely snapped. Bowie was rolling down the street in a beat-up Mercedes convertible, probably coked out of his mind, when he came across his dealer. He was convinced the guy had cheated him, and in a fit of rage proceeded to ram his car repeatedly in broad daylight. I was so crazed I started ramming him. He looked around and I could see he was mortally terrified for his life. I'm not surprised. I rammed him for it must have been a good 5 to 10 minutes, which is a very long time actually. Nobody stopped me. Nobody did anything. Bowie still wasn't done. He drove to a hotel and raced around the parking lot at high speeds. He did this for a while until he decided to let go of the wheel. At that very moment, the car ran out of gas, possibly saving his life. The experience served as the inspiration for the song Always Crashing in the Same Car. In the following years, Bowie did finally manage to get his drug use under control. According to friends, it was his marriage to supermodel Aman, however, that led to him quitting drugs entirely. Looking back at the madness of the 1970s, one can believe it really was a side effect of the cocaine.